All right, let's dive right into this fascinating explainer on the Awesome Novel Studio. If you've ever played around with AI writing tools, you've probably noticed that the magic kind of fades the second you try to generate something truly massive. Well, that's exactly where this specific open source Claude Code plugin comes into play. It doesn't just act as a basic writing assistant, it actually functions as a fully automated, multi agent publishing house that's specifically engineered for long form web fiction. Today, we're going to explore exactly how it orchestrates an entire digital workforce of AI agents to completely automate the writing pipeline, going from a blank page proposal all the way to a polished episode. So, here's how we're going to break down this complex factory architecture today. 1. The AI writing wall. 2. The 18-agent solution. 3. The creation pipeline. 4. The 16-axis polish. 5. Controlling the workflow. And finally, 6. Proof and limitations. Let's get into it. First up, Section 1, the AI writing wall. Okay, so you know how AI writing can be incredibly impressive at first, but then it completely breaks down if you try to push it to write a whole book? Generating a single 5,000 character episode is essentially a solved problem at this point. You type a prompt, you get a solid chapter. Boom. But scaling that up to 300 episodes totaling over 1.5 million characters? No way. That is where you hit total systemic collapse. To put that into perspective, there are really 3 walls of long-form AI fiction, and these are exactly what this architecture was built to overcome. Let's look at the symptoms. First, you get character depth collapse. By episode 20, distinct personalities just blur into that exact same generic AI voice. Second, you have story coherence breakdown. That brilliant foreshadowing planted in episode 5, yeah, the AI totally contradicts it by episode 40. And third, number and setting inconsistencies. Ages, dates, currencies, they all just start contradicting each other. Now, Awesome Novel Studio fixes this, but not by prompting the AI harder. It fixes it through rigid structural engineering. Which brings us to Section 2, the 18-agent solution. Rather than relying on a single chat window to do all the heavy lifting, the Awesome Novel Studio orchestrates a massive team, 18. That number represents the sheer volume of unique, specialized AI agents working together to handle the entire production pipeline. So you aren't just talking to Claude anymore, you're literally commanding a highly structured digital workforce. You can really think of these agents as specialized employees in a professional writer's room. They're partitioned perfectly across 4 distinct departments to isolate and conquer specific tasks. You've got 5 design agents, like the character architect, who focuses purely on personality. Then 4 creation agents actually writing the drafts. After that, an incredible 6 polish agents step in for quality assurance. And finally, 4 rewrite agents handle the revisions. Oh, and there's also a shared quality verifier agent bridging the creation and rewrite phases. It is an absolute masterclass in the division of labor. Moving right along to Section 3, the creation pipeline. Let's look at the actual mechanics of this chronological assembly line, because just like a real physical factory, the workflow here is strictly linear and systematic. It ensures that your foundational world building is locked in way before a single episode is even written. It starts with a proposal phase to nail down the concept. Then comes the critical design phase, plotting 25 episode arcs at a time. Only then does the creation phase begin, writing sequentially. And finally, the text hits the polish and rewrite loop. Essentially, you're trading that initial setup overhead for guaranteed structural integrity later on. Now, during that design phase, an auto-generated novel config file is created, and this is absolutely crucial. This file becomes the absolute source of truth. It completely eliminates those number and setting inconsistencies we discussed earlier, because the system's logic axis is constantly cross-checking every single new episode against the immutable rules stored in this master document. It's like having a continuity editor looking over your shoulder 24/7. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the 16-axis polish. What's really fascinating about this phase is how the system handles quality assurance after the text is actually generated. 6 agents run in parallel to mathematically enforce 16 distinct quality access. For instance, the voice access constantly verifies dialogue against a pre-established character voice table, making sure character depth never collapses. The silence access strictly limits overuse of trailing dots or dramatic pauses. The band axis aggressively hunts down and deletes those common AI cliches and meta-commentary. And my personal favorite, the alive axis, meticulously manages emotional distance to ensure characters react realistically during high tension points. And to prevent that second wall we talked about, the story coherence breakdown, this system employs something called the continuity bridge. Think of this as a specialized skill that acts like a short-term memory relay. Right before a new episode is written, it collects the timeline, the active foreshadowing, and the current character states from the previous 2 episodes, and feeds all of that directly to the creation agent. It literally physically prevents the AI from contradicting what just happened a chapter ago. Next up, Section 5, Controlling the Workflow. So how do you actually steer this 18-agent publishing house from your terminal? Do you have to micromanage every single agent? Not at all. You orchestrate the whole shebang using simple slash commands inside Claude Code. You run /designbig to let the agents build the world and rules. You run create to kick off the sequential writing process. And if you need to make changes, /rewrite will automatically calculate the downstream impact of your edits, while /polish fires up those 16-axis quality checks. Oh, and another crucial feature here is the range targeting capability. If you decide to change a core plot decision mid-project, you can precisely target specific episode ranges without having to rerun the entire million-character pipeline. You can literally just tell the system, hey, selectively revise episodes 1 through 10 based on this new world rule. And it handles the rest. It's a massive time saver.
And finally, let's wrap things up with Section 6, Proof and Limitations.
So, the big question, does this actually produce successful fiction in the real world? According to the repository, yes, it does. The system has produced a web novel boasting over 2,500 daily views. The author reported over 1,000 likes, 300 subscribers, and, perhaps most impressively, noted that a novel written with this exact system successfully secured an actual publishing deal. That's pretty wild. But, as always in this explainer, we have to be completely impartial and look at the actual limitations. First, the system currently leans really heavily into Korean market conventions, especially when generating proposals and structuring chapters. Second, that brilliant continuity bridge we talked about, it's currently limited to a 2-episode look-back. So if you want consistency between episode 8 and episode 150, you are heavily relying on creating an incredibly detailed master config file to bridge those long-term gaps. And third, the pipeline ends at polished markdown files. There's no built-in exporter to push this directly to a publishing platform for you. Even with those limitations, though, what this plugin achieves is just remarkable. It's a fascinating architecture, and it really forces us to ask a difficult question. Will multi-agent systems eventually replace the human author entirely, or will they simply evolve into the ultimate structurally perfect co-writer? When a machine can mathematically govern its own narrative continuity, where exactly does the human fit in? It's definitely something to think about the next time you open a blank document. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.